The grand conclave of the Vexel Concordance resonated with a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight. Within the cavernous, obsidian chamber, where walls of polished black stone drank the light and gave nothing back, the assembled high strategists and prime conduits stood as living statues of polished, crystalline chitin. Their multifaceted eyes, usually swirling with the cold light of pure logic, were fixed upon the central holographic display. It showed a single, solitary vessel, drifting at the edge of their sovereign territory, the Vexel Reach. The ship was a profound insult to every tenet of Vexel design philosophy. It was asymmetrical, scarred, and of a dull, non-reflective material that seemed to absorb sensor pings like a patch of void. It was old, impossibly so, its hull pitted with the marks of micrometeoroids accumulated over millennia, a testament to a journey that defied comprehension. It was a ghost, a relic, a piece of driftwood on the cosmic ocean, and it had not responded to a single one of their automated sovereignty challenges. Prime Conduit Vorlag, his towering, obsidian-black form shimmering under the chamber's ambient glow, finally broke the stillness. His voice was a series of sharp, resonant chimes that translated into the formal lexicon of the conclave. It is an derelict, a tomb ship lost to the ages. Its internal systems are dark, its energy signature is less than that of a dormant asteroid. It poses no threat, it is an irrelevance. His declaration was one of absolute certainty, a pillar of Vexel dogma. For the Vexel, power was expressed through overwhelming energy signatures, through the brilliant flare of active shields, through the sharp, clean lines of warp-capable nacelles. This artifact, possessed none of these. From the periphery, a slighter, older form shifted. High strategist Kalen, his own carapace the color of aged ivory and etched with the fine lines of countless campaigns, did not look at Vorlag. His gaze remained locked on the holographic ship, his ancient mind sifting through data that felt fundamentally wrong. Prime Conduit, Kalen's voice was a lower, more grating resonance like stone grinding on stone. I counsel caution. The vessel's silence is not the silence of death. It is the silence of stillness. Our deep-range gravimetric sensors cannot get a proper reading. The ship does not displace space-time as it should. It is as if the universe has not yet decided its mass. A wave of derisive clicks echoed from Vorlag's coterie of strategists. Metaphysics, Kalen? Vorlag chimed, his tone sharp with disdain. We are a civilization of facts, of empirical data. The fact is, the object is moving at sublight speeds on a trajectory that will carry it past our system. It has no active weapon ports, no discernible shield emitters, no engine flare. It is a piece of cosmic debris, piloted by ghosts or automated systems that failed long ago. We have wasted enough time on this anomaly. Kalen stepped forward, the sound of his crystalline claws on the obsidian floor a stark punctuation in the heavy air. And yet it navigated the Serpent's Maw, a gravitational labyrinth that has torn apart even our most advanced scout vessels. It did not blunder through. Its trajectory shows 1,000 precise minute course corrections. It navigated a graveyard it should not have been able to perceive. That is not the work of a derelict. That is the work of a master navigator. The chamber fell silent again, Kalen's words hanging in the air like a disruptive harmonic. The Vexel mind abhorred uncertainty. It was a flaw, a weakness to be excised through logic and overwhelming force. This ship in its quiet, passive existence was the very embodiment of uncertainty. Its age was an affront. The Vexel were an old race, their empire forged over eons of conquest, their history etched into the very star stuff of their quadrant. They had catalogued every star, every planet, every spacefaring civilization that had ever risen and fallen within 1,000 light years. But this ship, its material composition did not match any known element or alloy. Its design philosophy was utterly alien. It was a question mark made manifest, hanging in the void at their border. It is from the species calling themselves humanity, another strategist, a younger, more ambitious conduit named Jorik, offered. Our deep archive intelligence, fragmented as it is, suggests they are a young race, ephemeral, prone to internal conflict. Their technology is assessed as primitive, kinetic, and fission-based. They are not a concern. He projected a small, flickering image beside the great ship, a rendering of a human being, soft, fleshy, and absurdly fragile. The image was met with a low hum of dismissal from the assembled Vexel. Such a creature could not possibly have built the vessel floating at their edge, unless it was a stolen relic from a greater, vanished race. Then they are scavengers, Vo. Arlag concluded, his logic sharp and final. They have found this artifact and are too primitive to operate it properly. This only reinforces its status as a non-threat. We will dispatch a patrol. They will issue a final warning, and if it is not heeded, they will blast the relic into its constituent atoms. The Vexel reach must remain pure. We will not have the refuse of other, lesser species cluttering our space. He made a gesture of finality, a sharp turn of his primary manipulators that signified a closed debate. But Kalen did not yield. Prime conduit to use force without understanding the object of that force is imprecise. It is a failure of strategy. What if its passive state is a form of defense? What if its silence is a listening post? The energy our sensors have poured into it have not reflected back. They have been absorbed, vanished. There is no thermal bloom, no radiation echo. Where did that energy go? The question was deeply unsettling. The laws of thermodynamics were as sacred to the Vexel as the purity of form, their guiding principle of existence. Energy did not simply vanish. It changed form, it dissipated, but it was always accounted for. The human ship was a thermodynamic black hole, a violation of established physics. The fear Kalen felt was not the primal fear of a predator, but the intellectual terror of a mathematician who has discovered a flaw in the very concept of numbers. It was a cold, creeping dread that suggested their understanding of the universe was profoundly, terrifyingly incomplete. Vorlag's multifaceted eyes narrowed, the swirling lights within them hardening into points of cold fire. He saw Kalen's caution not as wisdom, but as the decay of an old mind, a mind that had seen too many battles and had grown timid. The concordance had not been built on caution. It had been built on the unshakable certainty of Vexel superiority, on the application of irresistible force to solve any and all problems. Your concerns are noted, high strategist. Vorlag's voice was now coated in a thin layer of crystalline ice. But they are speculative. We will act on the data we have, not on the phantoms of your imagination. The Iron Windstrike flotilla is already on station at the border. They are our finest. Their purpose is to project absolute power, to be the final, unanswerable statement of Vexel authority. Let them be the ones to deliver our message. A show of force will resolve this ambiguity, as it always does. Kalen felt a deep chill settle in his core, a resonance of profound wrongness. The Iron Windstrike. It was not a patrol, it was a weapon of planetary devastation. A fleet of their most powerful ships, flying in a precise interlocking formation designed to channel the entirety of their reactor outputs into a single, cohesive lance of energy capable of cracking a continental plate. To use it on a single, silent, ancient vessel was not just overkill. It was a profound act of arrogance. It was the scream of a child in a silent library, a violent outburst against a mystery that demanded quiet contemplation. As the conclave signaled their assent to Vorlag's decree, Kalen looked back at the image of the human ship. It floated there, serene and patient, like a mountain that has witnessed the birth and death of seasons, of winds, of empires. It did not know it had been condemned, and Kalen felt with a certainty that defied all Vexel logic that it did not care. The universe was holding its breath, and the Vexel concordance, in its blind pride, was about to make a terrible, terrible mistake. The message from the human ship arrived at the precise moment the Iron Windstrike flotilla finished its final tactical alignment. It did not come over any military channel. It was not a broadcast of surrender, nor was it a defiant threat. It simply appeared. On every primary command screen, on every personal datapad, on the grand holographic display in the heart of the Vexel conclave, a new window bloomed into existence. It bypassed every Vexel security protocol, every firewall, every encryption layer, as if they were simply not there. The intrusion was so seamless, so elegant, it was more terrifying than a direct assault. It was the ghost in the machine, a whisper that had materialized in the most secure, sanctified spaces of their empire. The message itself was one of crushing simplicity. It was not text in any Vexel language, but a stream of pure, unadulterated mathematical truth. It began with the fundamental constants of the universe, the speed of light, the Planck constant, the gravitational constant. Then it built elegantly into the laws of physics, from classical mechanics to quantum theory, presented with a clarity and depth that made Vexel science look like the scrawlings of primitives. It was a unified theory, a perfect equation that described the entirety of existence, a concept their greatest minds had pursued for centuries and had dismissed as a theoretical impossibility. Why, after laying bare the secrets of the cosmos in a silent, flowing script of universal logic, it concluded with a simple, serene image, a rotating double helix of DNA, and beside it the star chart of their local cluster with a single, gentle, pulsating light indicating the human homeworld, a place they had dismissed as insignificant. The transmission ended. No demands, no threats, no introduction. It was a statement of being. We are here. This is who we are. This is what we know. In the Grand Conclave, the assembled Vexel were frozen. The display of knowledge was so far beyond them that it was difficult to even process. They were a spacefaring empire, masters of their quadrant, and they had just been shown that their entire understanding of the universe was a crude approximation. They were children who had just been handed the master key to creation by an entity they could not comprehend. Vorlag was the first to recover, his arrogance a shield against the crushing weight of his own insignificance. "A trick," he chimed, his resonance wavering for the first time. "A data packet stolen from some long-dead archive, a psychological ploy to make us hesitate. It changes nothing. They show us equations while we show them the purity of force." But Kalen saw it for what it was. It was not a threat, it was a warning. It was a final, polite, and deeply compassionate plea. "Do not do this. You do not understand what you are dealing with." He keyed his own console, bypassing the Prime Conduit's authority, an act of high treason. He opened a direct channel to the flotilla commander. "Stand down," he commanded, his voice a low, urgent growl. "Power down your weapon systems. Do not, under any circumstances, engage that vessel." The flotilla commander, a rigid dogmatist loyal to Vorlag, hesitated. His orders were clear. "High Strategist, the Prime Conduit's command is absolute. The iron windstrike is at full charge. We are prepared to fire on his mark." "You will be firing on a ghost," Kalen pleaded, his mind racing. "You are pointing a sword at the sea. You cannot harm it, but you will provoke the tide." Before the commander could respond, Vorlag's override command cut through the channel. "Fire!" The Prime Conduit's voice was a screech of pure, undiluted fury. He would not be made to look weak. He would not allow this silent, arrogant relic to undermine 1,000 years of Vexel dominance with a string of numbers. He would erase this anomaly from existence, and in doing so, restore the certainty that was the bedrock of his power. On the bridge of the Vexel flagship, the commander gave the final order. Across the vast formation of warships, titanic conduits of energized plasma focused into a single point. Space itself seemed to warp and distort before the assembled fleet, the raw power being channeled so immense that it bent light. The void began to glow, a blinding spear of white-hot energy, the collective might of the Vexel Concordance's finest, forming into a lance of pure destruction. The iron windstrike was unleashed. It was not an explosion. It was not a beam of light that crossed the void. It was an event. A sliver of pure, weaponized reality tore through the space between the Vexel fleet and the ancient human ship. It moved at near-light speed, a line of absolute annihilation that would scour the ship from existence and leave nothing but superheated gas in its wake. Kalen watched, his ancient heart crystal pulsing with a dreadful, final certainty. He had failed. Their arrogance had doomed them. But the human ship did not raise shields. It did not maneuver. It did not fire a counterweapon. It simply changed. The dull, non-reflective hull shimmered for a fraction of a second, not with energy but with something else. It was a flicker of impossibility, a brief glimpse into a state of matter that was not solid, not liquid, not gas. The space around the ship seemed to soften, to lose its definition. The iron windstrike, the ultimate expression of Vexel power, the planet cracker, the unanswerable argument, touched that softened space, and it ceased to be. There was no impact, no flash of light, no explosion. The lance of pure energy, a force that could crack a world, simply vanished. One moment it was there, a terrifying needle of white-hot fury, and the next it was gone, not dissipated, not absorbed. It was unmade. The fundamental principles that allowed it to exist were simply switched off. It was as if a line of code had been deleted from the universe. The Vexel on the bridge of the flagship stared in mute, catatonic horror. Their ultimate weapon had been nullified as easily as one might snuff out a candle. But the event was not over. The field of nothingness that had enveloped the human ship began to expand. It was not a wave of energy. It was a wave of silence, of calm, of absolute cessation. It moved slowly, deliberately, not with malice, but with an air of immense, sorrowful inevitability. It swept over. Are the first of the Vexel warships. The ship did not explode. Its crew did not scream. It simply came apart. The molecular bonds holding its armored hull together dissolved. The strong and weak nuclear forces that held its atoms intact were suspended. The ship, a masterpiece of Vexel engineering, a mountain of iron and crystal, reverted to its constituent elements. It became a cloud of inert, disorganized particles, a shimmering, beautiful, and utterly horrifying nebula of dust that gently expanded into the void. The field moved on, serene and silent, and touched the next ship in the formation. The same thing happened. A warship, crewed by hundreds, became a puff of dust, then another, and another. It was not a battle, it was a disassembly. It was a quiet, methodical, and utterly profound dismantling of the Vexel Concordance's pride. There was no violence, no sound, no anger. It was the most peaceful, and therefore the most terrifying act of destruction Kalen had ever witnessed. It was not war, it was erasure. In the Grand Conclave, a collective moan of pure existential dread rose from the assembled Vexel. Vorlag had collapsed, his crystalline form shuddering, his mind shattered by the utter negation of his worldview. Everything he believed, every principle of force and power he had built his life upon, had been undone by a quiet, expanding field of calm. Kalen stood alone, watching the holographic display as the last of the iron windstrike flotilla was gently, silently, and completely unmade. The ancient human ship remained, floating in the void, surrounded by a new, shimmering nebula of dust that had moments before been the mightiest fleet in the Vexel reach. The silence in the chamber was no longer one of tension. It was the silence of the grave, the silence of a civilization that had just come face to face with God and had tried to strike him down. A new message appeared on the screen, overlaying the scene of quiet devastation. This time it was not mathematics. It was a single line of text, translated flawlessly into the Vexel High lexicon. It was simple, direct, and carried the weight of 1,000 sorrows. We asked for peace. The aftermath was a stillness that permeated every corner of the Vexel Concordance. The Grand Conclave was a tomb, its members paralyzed by a shock so profound it had reset the foundations of their culture. The concept of purity of form, of overwhelming force as the ultimate arbiter, had not just been defeated. It had been rendered laughably, tragically obsolete. They had thrown their mightiest spear, and it had been caught on the wind and turned to smoke. Vorlag was a broken thing, his mind lost in the feedback loop of his own shattered certainty. It fell to Kalen to act, not as a strategist of war, but as a supplicant. He stood alone in the center of the obsidian chamber, the great holographic display now showing only the serene, ancient human ship. The dust cloud of his fleet was a faint, glittering shroud around it. He took a breath, the resonant crystals in his chest humming a low, somber tone of formal supplication. He opened a channel, directing it not at the ship's systems, but broadcasting it into the void, a message of pure, unshielded intent. He did not know if they would listen. He did not know if they even could. "This is High Strategist Kalen of the Vexel Concordance," he began, his voice devoid of artifice or authority. We have made a grave error. Your display of capability is beyond our comprehension. We do not understand what you are. We offer our unconditional cessation of hostilities. We ask for guidance." The final word was a struggle, a concept alien to the Vexel tongue, a word for the weak and the lost. He was now both. For a long time, there was only silence. Kalen waited, the full weight of his civilization's future resting on this single, desperate plea. He expected no response. He expected only the calm, quiet field of dissolution to expand and unmake his world as it had unmade his fleet. Instead, a new communication came through. It was not a text message, but an invitation. A set of coordinates appeared, mapping a path for a single, small vessel to approach the human ship. It was a gesture of trust so absolute, so audacious in the face of what they had just done, that it struck Kalen with more force than the iron windstrike. He selected Emissary Jael for the task. She was young, her mind not yet hardened into the rigid dogma of the older generations, and she possessed a deep curiosity that was often mistaken for a weakness. Kalen saw it as their only hope. He briefed her himself, his instructions simple and direct. "Observe, listen, do not threaten, do not posture. You are not a representative of a great power. You are a student going to meet a master. Learn what they are and pray they are merciful." Jael's journey to the human ship was an experience that began to unravel her Vexel senses. Her small diplomatic courier, a Vess, of polished chrome and sharp angles, felt crude and barbaric next to the silent giant. As she approached, a section of the ancient hull did not open like a hangar door. It seemed to dissolve, turning into a shimmering, permeable membrane of light. She guided her ship through it, and the membrane solidified behind her, the hull seamless once more. She was inside. The internal environment was another shock. There was no sterile metallic corridor. There were no armed guards. The air was soft, filled with the scent of damp earth and growing things. The light was not artificial. It seemed to emanate from the very walls, a warm, golden glow like that of a setting sun. She disembarked onto a deck that felt like moss-covered stone. She was in a vast, open space that resembled a forest grove. Great trees with silvery bark reached towards a ceiling so high it was lost in a soft, luminous mist. A gentle stream gurgled nearby, its water impossibly clear. Strange, beautiful birds with jeweled plumage flitted between the branches. It was not the interior of a starship. It was a world, a sanctuary. A figure approached her from the shade of one of the great trees. It was a human, a female, clad in a simple, gray, form-fitting garment. She was unarmed. Her face was calm, her eyes holding a deep, ancient sadness that seemed to resonate with the very age of her ship. Jael's threat assessment sensors, a part of her Vexel biology, were screaming, not with danger, but with a profound, overwhelming sense of presence. The human was radiating an aura of power so immense, and yet so perfectly controlled that it made the Vexel's aggressive posturing seem like the tantrum of an infant. "I am Captain Eva Rostova," the human said. Her voice was calm, melodic, and translated perfectly into Jael's mind, not through a device but as a direct understanding of thought. "Welcome aboard the Odyssey. We are glad you chose to come in peace this time." Jael, for the first time in her life, was at a loss for words. The sheer incongruity of her surroundings, of this peaceful being who commanded a vessel that could unmake fleets, was overwhelming. She managed a formal, rigid bow. "I am Emissary Jael. I come on behalf of the Vexel Concordance. We wish to understand." Rostova smiled, a gentle, sad expression. "Understanding is the beginning of wisdom. Walk with me." She led Jael along the path beside the stream. "You must have many questions. Ask." Jael's mind, trained in the arts of diplomatic confrontation and strategic assessment, struggled to form a coherent query. "Your ship, it is ancient." "By your standards, yes," Rostova replied. "We have been traveling for a very long time. This ship was not built in a factory. It grew. It is as much a living being as I am. It is our home, our library, our memory." "And your weapon?" Jael finally asked, the word feeling clumsy and brutal in this tranquil place. "The field that our fleet." "It was not a weapon," Rostova corrected her gently. "A weapon is a tool designed to inflict violent harm. What you witnessed was a decoherence field. It temporarily suspends the fundamental forces that hold matter together. It is a tool for disassembly, for recycling. We used it because it was the most compassionate way to neutralize a threat. There was no pain, no fear, just a quiet cessation. It was a tragedy that we were forced to use it at all." The concept was staggering. The Vexel's most feared weapon was a crude, violent outburst. The human's ultimate defensive measure was a tool of peace, a quiet and painless unmaking. Jael felt a profound sense of shame. Her people were barbarians, playing with fire in a universe governed by forces they could not even begin to imagine. "Why did you not use it sooner?" Jael asked. "Why did you allow our fleet to approach to charge its weapon?" "Because we hold to a single, inviolable principle," Rostova said, her voice growing heavy with philosophical weight. "Every conscious civilization must be given the chance to choose. We showed you who we were. We gave you the knowledge of the universe, a gift of understanding, hoping it would be enough to persuade you to choose a different path. We never act first. We only act to prevent a catastrophic action. Your leaders chose violence. We had to respect their choice, even as we were forced to negate its consequences." They arrived in a clearing where the luminous mist of the ceiling thinned, revealing not a metal roof, but a perfect, real-time star field. It was as if they were standing on an asteroid, open to the void, yet protected by an invisible shell. Jael could see her own system, the faint glimmer of the Vexel sun, and the shimmering dust cloud that had been her people's pride. "You believe in choice," Jael resonated, the concept beginning to form in her mind in a new way. "For the Vexel, there is only the correct path, the purity of form. All other paths are flawed and must be corrected by force if necessary." "We once believed something similar," Rostova said, her eyes distant, looking at the star field. "Humanity was once a fractured, violent species. We warred with ourselves, over land, over beliefs, over resources. We nearly extinguished ourselves a dozen times over. But from that crucible of self-destruction, we learned the most important lesson in the universe, that power used for domination is ultimately self-consuming. True strength, the only strength that endures, is the strength to understand, to nurture, to preserve. We are not conquerors. We are gardeners. We travel the void, seeding knowledge, offering a hand to young races, hoping they will choose to join the galactic conversation rather than trying to shout everyone else down." Jael looked at the human captain. She saw no arrogance, no pride in her victory, only a profound, ancient weariness, the weariness of a parent who has had to discipline a beloved but wayward child. "What do you want from us?" Jael asked, her voice small. "Nothing," Rostova replied, her simplicity once again a shock. "And everything. We want you to continue to exist. We want you to learn from this. We want you to look at the stars not as territories to be conquered, but as a community to be joined. Your focus on purity of form is not wrong, emissary. It is merely incomplete. The most pure, most elegant form in the universe is not a weapon, but a thriving, diverse ecosystem of conscious life. That is the truth we have to offer. As Jael stood there, absorbing the enormity of what she had been told, a new light began to pulse on the starfield display. It was faint, originating from a point far beyond the edge of their galaxy in the deep intergalactic void. It was not a star. It was a signal, a pattern of such immense complexity that it made the mathematical treatise the humans had sent earlier look like a child's primer. Jael's diplomatic training kicked in. A communication from another species. Rostova's expression turned grim, the ancient sadness in her eyes deepening into a cold, dark abyss of memory. Not a communication, she said, her voice a low whisper that seemed to chill the very air. An echo, the last echo. She manipulated a control that seemed to be woven from the light itself, and the signal was translated. It was not a language of words, but of raw emotion, of concepts broadcast across cosmic distances. A wave of terror, of despair, of absolute, soul-crushing loss washed over Jael, so powerful it nearly brought her to her knees. She witnessed, in a flash of empathic understanding, the death of a civilization 1 billion years old. She saw galaxies consumed, not by war, but by something else, something silent and hungry that moved through the void like a disease. She saw stars being extinguished like candles in a wind. The universe is older than you can imagine, Rostova said, her voice now the tolling of a funeral bell. And it is not empty. There are things that sleep in the dark between galaxies. We call them the silent consuming. They are not alive in a way you or I would understand. They are a law of physics that has gained a malevolent appetite. They awaken in cycles measured in hundreds of millions of years. They sweep through a galaxy, and when they are done, there is nothing left but cold, dark matter and the memory of light. She pointed to the signal. That is the last message of the species that inhabited the Andromeda galaxy before the last great cycle. They were a magnificent people. They learned how to build worlds from starlight, and they were erased. Their message is not a greeting. It is a warning, a timestamp. The cycle is beginning again, and this time it is aimed at our galaxy. Jael stared, her mind reeling, the conflict with her people, the destruction of their fleet, all of it shrinking into utter insignificance. They had been posturing on the shores of an ocean, oblivious to the world-drowning tsunami that was rising in the deep. This ship, the Odyssey, Rostova continued, is not a warship. It is an ark. It carries the memory, the art, the science, the very soul of every civilization we have met that has fallen either to its own folly or to the darkness out there. We are not gardeners. That was a simplification. We are librarians preserving the stories of the dead, but our primary mission has changed. We are no longer just preserving the past. We are trying to build a future. We are gathering allies. We are searching for any race with the strength, the wisdom, and the courage to stand with us, not as subjects, but as equals when the long night comes. She turned and looked at Jael, her gaze piercing, heavy with the weight of galaxies. The Vexel Concordance has great strength. You have discipline. You have a will of iron, but your strength is pointed inward at yourselves and your neighbors. You have spent your entire history trying to prove you are the most powerful voice in the room. Rostova gestured to the T. Our rifling, pulsing signal from the void. There is a silence coming that will drown out all voices, great and small. So I will ask you, emissary Jael of the Vexel, a new question. Will you learn to sing with us before the silence takes us all? Jael looked from the human captain to the ghost light of a dead galaxy. She thought of her people, of their pride, their arrogance, and their now shattered certainty. She thought of high strategist Kalen and his quiet, lonely wisdom. She realized that the human ship, the ancient vessel no one had feared, had not come to their system by accident. It had been a test of their species' character. They had failed it catastrophically, and yet they had been given another chance. Not a chance to surrender, but a chance to stand up, to become something more than they had ever dreamed of being. Her people's purity of form had always been about achieving a perfect final state. She now understood that the only perfect state was the struggle itself, the choice to stand against the encroaching dark, not alone, but together. I will take your message to my people, Jael said, her own voice resonating with a new, profound gravity. It was no longer the voice of an emissary. It was the voice of a partner. In the quiet, living heart of the ancient human ship, surrounded by the ghosts of 1,000 fallen worlds and facing the promise of a shared, terrible dawn, two civilizations took their first, hesitant step into a much larger and much more frightening universe. The war for the Vexel Reach was over. The war for everything had just begun.